scrape me off the court of the Astrodome, and I claim it's going to be her they're going to scrape off. So that's what it's all about, and it is going to be the battle of the sexes. Don't anybody let you tell you it's any different. The male is king, the male is supreme. I've said it over and over again. I still feel that way. Girls play a nice game of tennis for girls. But when they get out there on a court with the man, even a tired old man of 55, they're going to be in big trouble. A 55-year-old guy, if he'll stay on his vitamin pill program, take those 415 vitamins every day, and jog and train and keep his tennis up, why, you can last and beat those girls.
I had to prove that women athletes are good, that tennis is a great sport, and help people to understand that gender is not as big a deal as people think.
That may have been it. Third match point. Whoa.
Billie Jean King was born in Long Beach, California on November 22, 1943. When Billie first began playing tennis, it was still a sport predominantly played by the wealthy or in country clubs. Little did she know that she would become the most influential female tennis player of her time, despite the popular belief that men were superior to women in sports. By defeating Bobby Riggs and creating the Women's Sports Foundation, she fought for women and fought to establish their role in sports.
So I go out to the public park for my first instruction. And at the end of the day, I said to my mom, "Mom, I found out what I'm going to do with my life. This is it."
The majority of Billie's career took place during the 1960s and the 1970s. These were 2 decades characterized by women, African Americans, Native Americans, gays and lesbians, and any other minority group joining together for the fight for equality. Also, the fight for peace and the fight against the war in Vietnam swept over the nation. Despite the 2 decades being dominated by social change and liberal beliefs, Republican Richard Nixon found great success that carried him into the White House. He used his movement of conservatism and traditional family roles to spark the silent majority to carry him into victory. The divisions in these 2 political beliefs would spark arguments that would last for generations to come, and some that still exist today. It is in this time period when Billie Jean King's career and influence as a tennis player really began to grow. By 1967, at the age of only 23, she had become the top-ranked women's player in the world. At this time, it became clear that King was more than just a phenomenal tennis player, but also an activist for social change. She began the fight so that men and women would be paid.
In 1968 was the first year that we actually got prize money. It didn't even dawn on me that we would get less. Rod Laver won Wimbledon. He got 2,000 pounds in 1968, and I got 750 pounds. And I went, oh.
In 1970, she was one of the first players in the brand new Virginia Slims Tour for women. Not much later, she became the first female athlete to earn more than $100,000 in winnings for a single year. Even though she made decent money compared to the men, she was angry about the much smaller paychecks that her competitors and peers received. She then went on in 1973 to form the Women's Tennis Association. This group created tournaments for women to play in for prize money.
That is the birth of women's professional tennis. And our goal was we wanted any girl born in the world, if she is good enough, there's a place for her to play, to make a living. A lot of people don't think we're going to make it. I had guys tell me that probably nobody would ever pay even a dime to watch us play.
In the same year, she threatened to boycott the U.S. Open if the gap between the pay wasn't addressed. Her demands were met, making the U.S. Open the first tournament to offer equal prize money to men and women. Bobby Riggs, a 1939 champion of Wimbledon, had fallen out of popularity and the spotlight. He challenged that he could beat any female tennis player in a match. First, he challenged Australia's Margaret Court and defeated her with little trouble. After this, King knew she needed to play him and feared that women's tennis had been set back a number of years.
There's no way a woman can play tennis with a good man tennis player. This is a battle of the sexes.
Bobby Riggs, he was a former #1 player. He'd won the Triple Crown at Wimbledon. We're only in our 3rd year of women's professional tennis. We are in a very tenuous position. I started thinking about society and women and what this might mean. I knew I had to play him. I knew I had to win.
This so-called Battle of the Sexes had turned from another silly bet from Bobby Riggs into a national phenomenon, not only for the tennis fanatics but for the country as a whole. It had become a symbol for the two main conflicting views at the time, either that women and men should be paid equally because they are equal, or that men will always be superior to women and therefore they should be paid more. The match was to be held at the Houston Astrodome on September 20th, 1973. Over 30,000 fans were in attendance and an estimated 50 million watched from home, making it the most watched tennis match of all time, which is a record that stands to this day. King was carried in like Cleopatra, sitting atop a throne carried by 4 men. Riggs, not to be outdone, was wheeled in on a rickshaw by women he called Bobby's bosom buddies. King crushed Riggs, dominated him in 3 straight sets, 6-4, 6-3, and again 6-3. The impact this had in some ways cannot even be measured, with so many people watching and about half of them rooting for Riggs, thinking that there was no way a woman could beat a man. Billie Jean King turned people's viewpoints upside down and inside out by proving once and for all that men and women are equal, and in some cases, women are even better.
I drop shotted, I lobbed, I floated one, I went to net. I hit the ball as softly as I could, so he had to generate all the power. And I was going to run him into the ground.
After the match, King was interviewed and she had this to say.
I love tennis very much. I wanted it to change ever since I started in the sport. I thought it was just for the rich and just for the white. And ever since that day when I was 11 years old and I wasn't allowed in a photo because I wasn't wearing a tennis skirt, I knew then that I wanted to change the sport. And tonight, a lot of non-tennis people saw tennis for the first time. I don't even care what kind of match it was.
Riggs was interviewed as well, where he humbly accepted defeat.
Are you going to have a rematch with Billie Jean King?
As far as I know, the contracts call for a return match, but that's up to Jerry Parencio to try to arrange. I hope so. I would like a return match. I feel I can do better. Billie Jean was super that night, as you know, played a fantastic game, and I wasn't in it. She won a decisive victory, and I have no excuses. All I can say is that I'm not discouraged. I'm still the same guy. I still feel the same as I always have. I had said before the match that I was going to win it, that there'd be no contest, and I was wrong. She said that they were going to scrape me off the floor of the Astrodome. They didn't quite have to do that, but almost. But I would like to get into a real serious frame of mind and maybe go through a little tougher practice routine than I had at this one. And I would love to play her again.
It wasn't about tennis. It was about history. It was about social change.
Some would go on to question the validity of the match. They said that Riggs had bet a large sum on Billie and threw the match to make a massive profit. Billie, as well as many others, denied these accusations, as it was way more in Riggs' favor to have won the match, and he openly admitted that Billie had played a great game. Because of Billie's dedication to the fight for women's rights, she was named one of Life magazine's 100 Most Important Americans of the 20th Century. She was the only female athlete who made the list and only one of 4 total athletes on the entire list. After winning the Battle of the Sexes match in 1973, King would be named Sports Illustrated's Person of the Year, the first woman ever to receive that honor. In 1974, she created the Women's Sports Foundation, which main goal was to increase the participation of women in sports. Billie would go on to win 20 Wimbledon titles in her career. However, none of these victories would prove as memorable or as influential as her victory in the Battle of the Sexes, where she changed the role of women in sports forever.